When a woman walked into a dojo in Tokyo in 1971 and pointed a real sword at Bruce Lee's face, nobody in the world knew what was going to happen next. Not the martial arts community, not the film industry, not even the people standing in that room, because nobody had ever seen anything like this before. Her name was Tomoe Shiraishi. She was 41 years old. She had been training with a sword since she was 9. 32 years of practice, every single morning, no days off, no excuses, no breaks for sickness or cold or grief or anything else life threw at her. And she had never lost, not once, not to anyone. For 10 years, she had issued open challenges to the greatest martial artists in Japan, judo masters, karate champions, military fighters, men who had trained their whole lives and believed they were ready for anything. She faced every single one of them with a real blade, not a practice weapon, not a wooden sword, a live steel blade that could end a fight in one movement. And she put 3 of them in the hospital. She stopped her sword in time, but only just. Now she had heard a new name, a name that was spreading through every dojo in Asia, like a fire moving through dry grass. A young man from Hong Kong, fast beyond what people believed was possible, a fighter who moved in ways that nobody had a clean word for yet. Bruce Lee and Tomoe Shiraishi had one question that had been burning in her chest for 20 years. A question she had dedicated her entire life to answering. Could a sword master defeat a barehanded fighter? Not in a story, not in theory, for real, on a real floor, with a real blade. She believed the answer was yes. She had always believed that. But Bruce Lee made her wonder, for the very first time, whether she was right. So she did what she had always done when a question got too big to think about any longer. She sent a letter, and Bruce Lee read it 4 times. Then he packed one bag, bought a ticket, and flew to Tokyo. He arrived on a Tuesday. He had 3 days before Friday midnight, the time she had chosen for their meeting. 3 days in a city that already knew what was coming, because Tomoe had told every school in Tokyo that she had invited him. She had made it public. She had already said that if Bruce Lee refused to come, the whole world would know he was afraid of a real blade. But he was not afraid. Or, and this is the part that nobody expected, he was afraid and he came anyway. And he spent those 3 days doing something that surprised everyone around him. He did almost nothing. No intense drilling, no speed training, no hours of footwork practice. He ran slowly in the mornings. He sat quietly in a cold garden. He visited an old sword master in a quiet part of the city and drank green tea and asked questions that had nothing to do with winning. He was listening, getting quiet enough to hear something that was already inside him. And then Friday came, and midnight came, and Bruce Lee pushed open the door of the Shiraishi dojo and walked inside. The floor was dark polished wood. The walls were plain and clean. In each corner, a single lantern burned very low, just enough light to see by and not quite enough to trust. The kind of light that makes distances hard to judge. The kind of light that makes a moving sword blade almost impossible to track with the eyes. She had planned that. At the far end of the room, sitting perfectly still with her eyes closed and the ancient sword across her knees, was Tomoe Shiraishi. She opened her eyes. They looked at each other across the empty dojo. She stood. She drew the sword. It came out in one movement so fast that the only sound it made was a single clean note, like a bell struck once. The lantern light ran along the blade like water. She moved into her stance, and then she attacked. The sword came down like a bolt of lightning. It stopped 2 inches from Bruce Lee's left cheek. He did not move. He did not flinch. He did not step back even 1 inch. He smiled. And he said 4 words that nobody in that room had ever heard anyone say that, close to Tomoe Shiraishi's blade. What happened next in that dojo? What Bruce Lee did with his bare hands against that 400-year-old sword, in the secret he had been hiding from everyone since before he even boarded the plane to Tokyo, a secret that changed the meaning of everything that happened that night. That is what this story is about. Watch the whole video, because the real truth of what happened in Tokyo in 1971 is not what you think it is. And the last thing you find out will change the way you see everything that came before it. Tokyo in November 1971 smelled like rain and engine smoke and fried food from the late-night street stalls along Shinjuku Dori. It was the kind of city that never truly slept. Even at 10 o'clock at night, oh, the streets pushed and breathed like a living thing. Neon signs burned in pink and yellow above the shop fronts. Salarymen in dark suits walked with their heads down against the wind. An old woman sold sweet potatoes from a cart on the corner, the smoke from her small coal fire curling up into the black sky like a prayer no one could hear. Bruce Lee arrived at Haneda Airport on a Tuesday. He carried one bag. He wore a plain black jacket and dark pants. He looked like any young man getting off a long flight, a little tired, a little stiff in the shoulders. Except that when he walked through the crowd at the arrivals gate, something happened that always happened and that he had never been able to explain. People moved, not because they knew who he was. Most of them did not. They moved because of something else. Something they felt without being able to name it. Like the way animals in a field all turn their heads in the same direction at the same moment, though they cannot say what they heard. It was in the way he moved. Not fast, not slow, just absolutely certain. Like water that knows exactly where it is going and is in no hurry about getting there because it was never going to arrive anywhere else. His contact in Tokyo was a man named Kenji Watanabe. Kenji was 45 years old, short and round in the shoulders, with kind eyes behind thick glasses that were always slightly smudged. He had a small film production office on the 4th floor of a narrow building in the Shinjuku district, sandwiched between a dentist and a company that made rubber stamps. He was a good man. He worried too much, but he was a good man. He had written to Bruce 3 times in the past year, asking him to come to Tokyo to discuss a new film project. Bruce had almost said no each time. He was always busy. He was the kind of busy that never really stopped, the kind that followed you into sleep and was already waiting when you woke up. But something about Kenji's last letter had caught his attention and would not let it go. Kenji had written near the end of his 3rd page, "There is a woman here you should meet. She may be the most dangerous person in Japan. She has challenged every great martial artist in this country for the last 10 years. She has never lost. She says hand fighters are toys and swords are real. She says she will prove it on anyone who dares to face her. She has heard your name, Mr. Lee. She is not afraid of it." Bruce had read those last 5 words 4 separate times. Then he had folded the letter, set it on his desk, and looked at the wall of his office in Hong Kong for a long moment. He could hear his children playing somewhere in the house behind him. The afternoon light came in flat and gold through the window. He picked up the letter again, read it once more. Then he packed his bag and bought a ticket. Kenji met him at the airport with a small black umbrella and a very worried look, which was the expression Bruce would come to think of as Kenji's natural face. The one he wore even when nothing was wrong, because he was the kind of person who was always checking to make sure nothing was about to go wrong. "Mr. Lee," Kenji bowed deeply. "Thank you for coming. I must tell you something right away. The situation has become more serious since my letter." "More serious how?" said Bruce. He picked up his single bag easily with one hand, and they began to walk toward the exit. Kenji pushed his glasses up his nose. "Shiraishi-sensei has been speaking publicly. She has told the other schools here in Tokyo that she has invited you. She has said very clearly that if you refuse to face her, the whole world will know that the great Bruce Lee is afraid of a real blade." He lowered his voice as if someone nearby might hear. "It is already spreading through the martial arts community here. People are talking about nothing else." Bruce was quiet for a moment. The automatic doors slid open, and the cold night air of Tokyo hit his face. Clean and sharp, smelling of rain that had fallen an hour ago and left the street black and shining. "Oi, she is putting pressure on me," said Bruce. "She wants me to react. She wants me angry. She wants me off balance before we even walk into the same room." "Yes," said Kenji. "That is exactly what her senior students say she does. She is not only a sword fighter, Mr. Lee. She is a strategist. She has been reading everything written about you for months. She knows how you move. She knows how you think. At least, she believes she does." Bruce smiled at the dark Tokyo sky, a small, genuine smile. "Good," he said. "That means she is taking this seriously." Kenji made a sound that was somewhere between a cough and a groan. "Mr. Lee, she uses a real sword, a live blade, always. She has never once agreed to use a practice weapon. She says practice weapons are for children. Her father trained her the same way. No, she has never lost a challenge in 10 years. 3 men who faced her ended up in hospital. She stopped the blade in time, but only just. Kenji, said Bruce. His voice was very quiet and very steady. Yes, I know. He said it without drama, without a speech. Just 2 words that landed on the cold, wet air and settled there, sure as stone. Kenji stopped talking. They found a taxi outside the terminal, a small white cab with a driver who wore white gloves and said nothing the entire ride, which suited them both. Bruce sat back and watched Tokyo slide past the window. The bright signs, the narrow streets, the rivers of people moving between buildings like water finding its way through stone. He had been to Japan before. He had trained here as a young man, and he held great respect for everything Japan had built and preserved in its martial arts. Whatever was coming on Friday night, it was not about arrogance. It was not about ego or reputation. It was not a competition in the bitter sense. It was something cleaner than that. It was about truth. Both of them, Bruce Lee and this woman he had not yet met, were chasing the same thing. He felt it as surely as he felt the cold glass of the taxi window beneath his palm. They just chased it from opposite ends of the same long road. In the taxi, Kenji reached into his coat pocket and held out a folded piece of paper. This arrived at my office this morning, from her. Bruce took it and unfolded it. The note was short and written in clean, careful English. The English of someone who had learned it seriously, from books. The way people learn things they mean to use. Mr. Lee, I know why you came. I respect that you did not run. Come to the Shiraishi dojo on Friday at midnight. Bring no weapons. You will not need them. Neither will I. Shiraishi. Bruce read it twice. Then he folded it carefully along its original creases and put it in his inside jacket pocket, close to his chest. Midnight, he said softly, mostly to himself. Yes, said Kenji. Some people in the community think it is for effect, for drama, to make the story sound more interesting when it is told afterward. No, said Bruce. He was looking at his own faint reflection in the taxi window, his face floating above the moving streets of Tokyo like a ghost riding through someone else's city. She chose midnight because the lanterns in her dojo burn low at that hour. Low light. In low light, a moving sword blade is far harder to track with the eyes. She is already setting her conditions. She has been planning this since before she sent the letter. Kenji stared at him. How do you know about the lanterns in her dojo? I don't, said Bruce simply. Not for certain. He pressed his palm flat against the cold glass of the window, feeling the hum of the city. 10 million lives going past in the dark. Each one a world entire. But if I were her, that is exactly what I would do. The taxi moved on through the wet black streets. Somewhere in this enormous city, a woman was holding a 400-year-old sword and thinking about Friday. And Bruce Lee was leaning against a taxi window in the dark, thinking about her, and feeling something bright and dangerous and completely alive moving around in his chest. He could not wait to meet her. Tomoe Shiraishi had been holding a sword since she was 9 years old. She was not supposed to. Her father, Ruichi Shiraishi, had not wanted to teach his daughter. This was 1939. The world was dark that year in ways that went deeper than weather. In 1939, girls in Japan were not supposed to do many things. Not lead, not speak first, not take up space at the center of any room. Sword training was for men and boys. The old ways said so. The old teachers said so, loudly and without apology. Every single person in the world around young Tomoe Shiraishi said so. Tomoe paid none of it any attention. She began by watching. Every single morning before school, while the air in the dojo still smelled of cold wood and sleep, she would walk in quietly and sit in the far left corner. The same corner always, where the morning shadow was deepest, and watch her father teach his male students. She watched the way their hands found the handle. She watched the precise way each foot moved on the dojo floor, never crossing, always planted. She watched the exact angle of the blade on every cut, the way a wrist turned, the way the shoulders opened and closed around each movement like a door swinging on a clean hinge. She did not speak. She did not ask questions. She simply watched, with her dark and very serious eyes, day after day after day, for 7 months, until one morning her father could not pretend she was not there. Ryuichi Shiraishi walked to the corner where his daughter sat. He stood over her for a moment without speaking. Then he reached down and held out a bakken, a practice sword cut from a single piece of solid oak, heavy enough that most boys struggled with it for the first month. "You have been watching for 7 months," he said. "Show me what you saw." Tomo stood up. She was small. The bakken was almost as long as she was. She took it in both hands, walked to the center of the dojo floor, and stood still for just a moment. Then she moved. She performed every single movement she had watched her father teach. Every cut, every step, every turn, every weight shift. In perfect order, from memory, with not one single mistake. The sequence took 4 minutes and 20 seconds. When she finished, she returned to her starting position and stood quietly, the bakken held correctly at her side. Saw her eyes forward. The male students stared at her as if she had just done something impossible. Her father stared at her too. His face was very still. Then Ryuichi Shiraishi sat down on the dojo floor and he laughed. A real laugh, deep and full and surprised. The kind that starts somewhere around the stomach and has nowhere to go but out. It was not a laugh at her. It was the laugh of a man who has just been given something he did not know he was missing. "Sit down, everyone," he said to his students, wiping his eyes. "Today you are all going to learn from a 9-year-old girl." From that morning on, Tomo trained every single day. She trained harder than any student her father had ever had. She trained when she was sick, moving through the forms with a fever burning behind her eyes because stopping felt worse than continuing. She trained when she was tired. She trained in summer heat so heavy that the sweat dropped from her fingers onto the dojo floor in a steady drip, like a slow clock counting something important. She trained in winter cold so sharp that the skin on her palms cracked and bled where it pressed against the wooden handle, and she wrapped the cracks in cloth and kept going. By the time she was 20, she was better than every student her father had. By the time she was 25, she was better than her father. He knew it before she did. He had been watching the moment approach for 2 years, the way you watch a tide coming in. You cannot stop it. You can only decide how you feel about it. He felt proud. He felt something he could not name, which was the feeling of watching your whole life's love passed on perfectly to someone who will carry it further than you ever could. One afternoon when Tomo was 26, Ryuichi called her to sit with him after practice. They sat on the dojo floor together the way they had sat 1,000 times. He held out his most prized possession, a sword that was 400 years old. The blade was so sharp it could cut a silk scarf drifting down through still air. The handle was wrapped in white ray skin and dark silk cord, worn smooth by generations of hands before theirs. "This belonged to your great-great-grandfather," he said. "He carried it in battle and was never defeated. Now it belongs to you." Tomoe held the sword with both hands in great care. Her eyes were very bright. She did not cry. She was never a person who cried easily. She felt things deeply, but she felt them the way the ground feels an earthquake, absorbing rather than breaking. "Father," she said quietly, "I am not a general. I have no battle to fight." Ryuichi looked at his daughter for a long time, the way you look at something you love and already miss, even when it is right in front of you. "You will find one," he said. He died 2 years later, in his sleep. The people who saw him that morning said there was a small smile on his face, as if whatever he had dreamed in his last hours had been very good. Tomo was 28 years old. She took over the school. Some of her father's oldest students left. These were men who had trained for decades and could not stomach the idea of bowing to a woman at the start of class. They left without ceremony and without looking back. Tomo watched them go and felt nothing about it except a clean, clear certainty. The ones who left were the ones who had never really understood what her father was teaching them, even after all those years. The ones who stayed understood. And new students came. Young people from around the district who had heard that the Shiraishi school was now taught by someone extraordinary. They came curious and stayed devoted. By the time Tomoe was 35, students traveled from all over Japan, then from Korea, from Hong Kong, from the Philippines. The Shiraishi dojo became a place that serious people came to because they were serious, because they wanted truth more than trophies. But something had been growing in Tomo's chest all those years. A question, not an angry one, not a proud one, a real, burning, impossible to ignore question, the kind that lives underneath everything you do and colors all of it, whether you want it to or not. The question was simple. What is more powerful, the sword or the empty hand? She had studied hand-to-hand fighters thoroughly and honestly. She had read every book she could find on kung fu, on karate, on judo, on Muay Thai. She had trained in 2 of them herself, long enough to understand them from the inside. She was not dismissive. She was never dismissive. But she believed, calmly, firmly, after 15 years of honest thought, that a sword in the hands of a true master would always defeat empty hands. Not because of pride, because of geometry. A sword extended the body's reach beyond any fist. The only question was whether the sword fighter was skilled enough to use that distance before the hand fighter could collapse it. Tomoe believed she was. She had spent 10 years challenging fighters to find out. Judo masters, karate champions, a former military hand-to-hand instructor who had trained soldiers for 7 years. Experts in 12 different fighting systems had stood across this dojo from her. Not one of them had defeated her. She had always been fair. She had always stopped the blade before causing real harm. She was never trying to hurt anyone. She was trying to find a true answer to a true question, and so far the answer had always been the same. Then the name Bruce Lee began appearing everywhere. First in the Hong Kong newspapers, which she read regularly, then in martial arts journals, in small articles that grew longer and more serious over time, then in quiet conversations between students in her own dojo, spoken in the same awed, uncertain tone that people use when they describe something they have seen but cannot quite explain. Tomoe read every word carefully. Then she went to a small theater in Shinjuku and watched 2 of his films on the same afternoon, back to back. She sat in the dark alone and watched him move on the screen. She was completely silent the whole time. Her senior student, a young man of 22 named Hiroshi Doi, was waiting outside the theater when she came out. He had watched her face during the films from 2 rows back, the way a student watches a teacher, looking not at the film, but at what the film was doing to the person beside him. "Sensei," said Hiroshi. "Hey, what did you think?" Tomo was quiet for a long moment. Around them, Tokyo moved and rushed and made its 10,000 noises. She seemed to be somewhere else entirely. "He does not fight the way I expected," she said finally. "Is he good?" said Hiroshi. Tomoe turned and looked at her student. Her dark eyes were doing something Hiroshi had not seen them do before. They were uncertain, not afraid, just genuinely, openly unsure, as if she had asked herself a question she did not yet have an answer to. "He is not good," she said slowly. "Good is the wrong word. He is something else, something I do not have a name for yet." She was quiet again for a moment. Then she said, "Write him a letter." Hiroshi blinked. "Sensei, are you certain?" Tomoe looked at the theater behind her. On the poster outside, a young man stood barefoot with his fists raised, his eyes burning with something that looked exactly like the truth she had been looking for. "He is the only one left who is worth asking," said Tomoe simply. "Write the letter." Bruce Lee had 3 days in Tokyo before Friday midnight. He spent those 3 days doing something that genuinely surprised Kenji Watanabe, who had been expecting almost anything else. He did almost nothing. He woke before the sun each morning. He ran, not far, not fast, just a long, slow loop through the quiet streets near Kenji's apartment, while the city was still gray and half asleep, and the only people out were delivery men and old men walking small dogs. He came back, stretched slowly on the narrow strip of Kenji's back garden, and then moved through his forms at a pace that made him look, from a distance, like a man simply standing in the cold morning air with his eyes closed. He ate plain food. He slept long hours. He read. He sat by the window and watched rain move across the Tokyo rooftops. On the evening of the first day, Kenji could not hold it in any longer. "Mr. Lee," he said carefully, setting down his chopsticks, "I expected you to be training, speed drills, footwork, some kind of, I don't know, preparation for a sword." "I am preparing," said Bruce. He was eating quietly, watching the rain. "This is preparation?" "Yes." Kenji looked at the window, then back at Bruce. "It looks like resting." Bruce set down his own chopsticks and looked at Kenji with a patience that had nothing impatient underneath it. When you are about to face something you have never faced before, he said, see, training harder is not always the right answer. Sometimes the right answer is to get quiet enough to hear what you already know. The knowledge is already in here. He touched his chest once, lightly. I just need to stop making enough noise to find it. Kenji opened his mouth and closed it again. But a real sword, he finally managed. I know what a sword can do, said Bruce. His voice was patient and gentle and completely certain, all three at once. I have studied weapons my whole life. I understand a sword's reach. I understand how the body holds it, what the wrist does at the moment of a cut, what the shoulder does on a thrust. I understand all of that in my head. He picked up his chopsticks again. I need to understand it somewhere deeper. That is different work, and it cannot be rushed. Kenji nodded slowly, though his expression said that he was nodding the way a person nods when they decide to trust something they do not fully understand. On the morning of the second day, Bruce asked a quiet favor. He asked Kenji to find him a sword artist who would agree to sit and talk, not demonstrate, not spar, not perform, just talk honestly, the way two people talk when they are both trying to understand something difficult. Kenji, whose worry was only slightly larger than his resourcefulness, made 3 phone calls and by afternoon had an address in the Narima district. The man's name was Saburo Igawa. He was 73 years old and had spent 60 of those years with a sword in his hands in one way or another. As a student, then a teacher, and then a retired man who still practiced alone every single morning in his small wooden house because some habits are not habits at all. They are the person. You cannot put them down any more than you can put down your own name. Bruce went alone. Kenji offered to come, and Bruce gently said no. Saburo's house smelled of green tea and old wood, and something that had no name but felt like time. They sat across a low table and Saburo poured tea without being asked, because pouring tea for a guest was simply the right shape for the moment. He was a man who understood shapes. You want to know about Shiraishi-san, said Saburo. It was not a question. I want to know about the sword, said Bruce. Not the weapon, the real thing underneath. I can read the outer sword well enough. Tell me what I cannot see. Saburo held his cup and was quiet for a long time. Not the quiet of a man thinking, the quiet of a man who already knows and is deciding how far the truth needs to travel before it reaches the right person. The sword, he said finally, moves with the breath. A true master thinks about nothing when the blade goes. No plan, no calculation. The breath goes out and the blade goes with it. The breath comes in and the blade returns. The mind is empty, completely empty. That is when the sword is most dangerous. Not when the fighter is thinking, when they have stopped. Bruce nodded slowly. He understood this from his own art, from a different direction. He had another word for it, but the thing being described was the same thing. And Shiraishi-sensei, he said. Saburo looked at him carefully. His eyes were very clear for a man of 73. The kind of clear that only comes from a lifetime of paying honest attention to things. She is the finest I have seen in 60 years, said Saburo. Not because she is the strongest. She is not exceptionally strong. Not even because she is fast, though she is very fast. She is the finest because she has no fear, not one single drop of it. And a person with no fear and a live blade in their hands is the most dangerous thing I have ever been close to. The rain tapped softly at Saburo's window. Why does she have no fear? Asked Bruce. Saburo set his cup down with great care. Because she already lost the thing she loved most, her father. When you have already survived the worst loss of your life, a challenge, even a real blade, does not frighten you the same way. Bruce went very still. She carries him with her when she fights. Saburo looked at him with quiet surprise. Yes. How did you understand that so quickly? Because it's what I would do, said Bruce softly. If I lost my father, I would pour everything into my art, every piece of the grief, every piece of the love. I would make the art hold all of it, because that's the only container big enough. He paused. She found the same container. The old man was quiet for a moment. Outside, a bicycle bell rang once on the wet street. Old man, said Bruce, if you were going to face her, not to beat her, not to win anything, If you wanted to have the truest possible conversation with her, the kind that has no words, what would you do? Saburo smiled. A very small smile, the kind worn smooth by age into something absolutely genuine. I would not try to stop the sword, he said. I would become the thing the sword cannot reach. Bruce looked at him steadily. And what is that? Saburo lifted his cup. Come back and tell me, he said. After Friday night. On the third day, something happened that nobody had planned for. Tomoe Shiraishi sent a second message. Kenji brought it to Bruce in the gray late afternoon, holding it with both hands the way people hold things they are slightly afraid of. The note was written in Japanese. Below it, in small, precise letters, Kenji had written his translation. Mr. Lee, I have heard that you visited the old teacher Igawa. He is a good man. Honey, I hope he was honest with you, because I intend to be honest with you also. This is not a game. I am not trying to embarrass you or frighten you. I am trying to find something true. I have spent my whole life looking for it. If you are who I think you are doing the same. Come alone on Friday, no audience. I changed my mind about witnesses. What happens between us is between us only. T. Shiraishi Bruce read it once, then again, then a third time. Each time something shifted slightly in his chest. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. Like hearing a piece of music you have never heard before, and knowing, 3 notes in, that it was written for you. No audience, said Kenji, his voice tight with worry. That frightens me more, not less. It shouldn't, said Bruce. He folded the note carefully along its original creases. She is removing the performance from it. No witnesses means no glory, no story to tell afterward, no reputation on the line for either of us. She wants the thing itself, just the truth, with nothing wrapped around it. He tucked the note into his jacket pocket and looked out the window at the darkening Tokyo afternoon. That's the most honest thing she could have offered me. Kenji fiddled with his glasses. And you trust it? Yes, said Bruce simply. A pause. So do I, he said again, quieter, as if saying it to himself, as if settling something that had still been slightly unsettled and was now done. Outside, Tokyo moved through its evening, 10 million people making their small daily shapes, none of them knowing that somewhere in a quiet apartment above a noodle shop, a man was sitting in the last of the gray daylight, thinking about truth and breath and the thing a sword cannot reach. Friday was one day away. The Shiraishi Dojo sat on a narrow street in the Bunkyo district of Tokyo, between an old stone temple on one side and a row of dark wooden houses on the other. There was no sign above the door, no name painted on the wall, no banner or flag or anything that said, "Here, this is the place." There was only a single paper lantern hanging from a hook above the entrance, burning a dim, steady orange in the cold black air. The kind of light that does not reach very far, just enough to find the door. The rest you had to do yourself. Bruce arrived at 11:50, 10 minutes early. He stood on the empty street for a moment and simply looked at the building. The street was absolutely quiet. Not the quiet of something absent, but the quiet of something holding still. Somewhere down the block, a bicycle leaned against a wall. A few dead leaves moved in a shallow circle on the wet stone pavement, pushed by a wind too small to feel. He breathed once, out and all the way in. He had not told Kenji exactly where he was going tonight. Kenji would have insisted on coming. Kenji would have stood outside the dojo door all night with his smudged glasses and his worried face. And the weight of that worry would have been one more thing in the room. What was about to happen needed to be clean. It needed to be only what it was, with nothing extra wrapped around it. Bruce pushed open the door and stepped inside. He removed his shoes in the entrance. The wood of the floor was cold against his socked feet and perfectly smooth. The smoothness of something cared for over many decades, polished by the movement of thousands of training sessions, worn to a surface that was almost like dark still water. He looked up. The dojo was exactly as he had pictured it during those 3 quiet days of listening. Dark polished floors, plain white walls, clean and bare except for one small scroll near the door with 4 brushed characters that he could not read. And in each of the 4 corners, a single paper lantern burning very low. 4 small warm flames that lit the room the way old memory lights things, softly from the edges, leaving the center in a gentle dimness where distances were hard to judge and the edges of moving things were harder still to track. He had been right about the lanterns. He allowed himself one small breath of something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite relief. He filed it away and let it go. At the far end of the dojo, sitting perfectly still on the floor, with her legs folded under her, was Tomo Shiraishi. She wore a white training robe, pressed and clean. Her hair was pulled back. The ancient sword rested across her knees in its dark wooden sheath, held in both hands. Her wrists relaxed. Her eyes were closed. Her breathing was so even and so quiet that from where Bruce stood, 8 meters away, she looked less like a person waiting and more like a person who had arrived at a place inside herself where waiting and not waiting were the same thing. Bruce walked to the center of the dojo floor and stood still. He did not speak. He did not cough or shift his feet or make any sound. He simply stood and gave her whatever time she needed, because whatever she was doing right now was real, and he respected real things. After perhaps 30 seconds, Tomoe Shiraishi opened her eyes. They looked at each other across the dim and quiet dojo. The 4 lanterns crackled their small sounds. The air between them was cold and smelled of old wood and something faintly like incense, though no incense was burning. "Mr. Lee," she said. Her English was precise and careful, each word placed exactly where she meant it. See, the English of someone who learned it from books and treated it with respect. "Shiraishi-sensei," said Bruce and bowed. A full bow, low and held for a moment. Not a performance, the real thing. She rose from the floor in one single motion, completely smooth, as if gravity had simply agreed to cooperate. The sheathed sword moved with her, settling naturally at her left side in the carrying position. And even sheathed, even held casually, the sword changed the room. It pushed the walls back an inch. It made the air feel slightly thinner. It reminded everything in the room, including Bruce, that it was there. "I appreciate that you came," she said. "Many people expected you would not." "Why would I not come?" said Bruce. He was standing easy, hands loose at his sides, feet at natural width. He looked completely calm, and he was. Calm the way deep water is calm, which is not empty but full, pressing in every direction at once below a still surface. Inside, every sense he owned was running at full reach. He was reading her weight, her breathing, the precise angle at which her right wrist rested against the sheath. The way her eyes moved, not just where they looked, but how they moved between one point and the next. All of it. "They thought you would be afraid," she said. "I am afraid," said Bruce. He said it the way you say something that is simply true. No drama around it, no apology, no pride going in the other direction. Just the fact, set down plainly. It surprised her. He saw it happen. Just a fraction, just a slight and quickly controlled shift in the muscles around her eyes. She had prepared for many things he might say. She had not prepared for that. "You admit it," she said, not quite a question. "Of course," said Bruce. "You are holding a 400-year-old sword, and you are the greatest living practitioner of your art. Only someone who wasn't paying attention would not be afraid." He paused one beat. "But being afraid and stepping back are not the same thing. I am afraid and I am standing here. Both of those things are completely true at the same time." The dojo was very quiet. Then Tomoe Shiraishi smiled. It was small, just a shift at the corners of her mouth, brief as the light off a turning blade. But it was absolutely genuine, and it changed her face entirely for the moment it lasted. Bruce had studied photographs of her, had listened to Kenji describe her, and had read what few accounts existed of people who had faced her. Not one of them had mentioned a smile. "My father said something like that," she said softly. "Almost those exact words. He sounds like he was a wise man." The smile faded slowly, the way a small light fades when you cup your hand around it. It did not become something cold. It became something deeper, older, something that had been carried a long way and was still being carried. "He was," she said. "He is the reason I am standing in this dojo at midnight with a sword in my hand." She paused. "He is the reason I do everything." "I know," said Bruce. Her eyes sharpened just a fraction. "How do you know that?" "Because the people who give everything to an art the way you have, Not most of themselves, everything, are always carrying someone. A teacher, a parent, someone who lit the fire and then left before they could see how high it burned. He held her gaze. You carry your father into this room every time you come here. He is here right now. The silence that followed was not empty. It was completely full. Tomo said nothing for 30 full seconds. Bruce counted them without meaning to. She looked at him with an expression that had no simple name. Somewhere between recognition and the particular pain of being seen accurately by someone who should have been a stranger. Then she drew the sword. It left the sheath in one movement, one sound, a single clean singing note, like a temple bell struck once in a room with good stone walls. The lantern light found the blade immediately, ran along its length like a thin river of gold, and showed Bruce the 400 years in it, of the sharpness, the absolute patience of a thing made for one purpose and perfect at it. She settled into her stance, both hands on the wrapped handle, blade angled at 45 degrees off the vertical, pointing at his center. Left foot forward, right foot back, weight moving between them like a tide that had not yet decided which way to go. Her eyes became something else then, still and clear and completely present, the way a mirror is present, showing everything and holding nothing. This was the stance Bruce had read about. This was what the old teacher, Saburo, had meant when he spoke about emptiness. Standing here across from it, 8 feet away, he felt it the way you feel weather. Not as a thought, but as a physical fact against the skin. She moved, not the full cut, not yet. A single blinding diagonal strike that crossed the distance between them in a fraction of a second. The first test, the opening word of the conversation, and stopped 2 inches from Bruce Lee's left cheek. The air moved against his face. The blade held perfectly still at that distance, not wavering by so much as a hair. He could see the edge of it in his peripheral vision, and it was the sharpest thing he had ever been close to. He had not moved. He had tracked it, tracked the angle, tracked her wrist and shoulder, read the intention in her body the way Saburo had described and the way Bruce's own years had taught him. And he had understood, in the fraction of a second available to understand anything, that the blade was going to stop. She was not cutting, she was asking. And he stood completely still and looked into her eyes past the blade. In the long-held moment that followed, he became aware that his own heartbeat was very loud to him and that the rest of the room was absolutely silent. "Step back," said Timon. Her voice was like the sound water makes under ice, steady, cold. Underneath it, something pressing. Bruce tilted his head just slightly to the left. His eyes stayed calm and stayed on hers. "Why?" he said. "Your sword already stopped. Your arm is tired. Your wrist is shaking. I can see it." The lanterns crackled once, just once. Tomo pulled the blade back slowly, smoothly, her eyes never leaving his face. The sword returned to her side. Her expression had changed again. The cold fire was still there, but something new had joined it. Something she had not budgeted for when she planned this evening. Curiosity. Real, open, wide-awake curiosity. "You did not move," she said. "No. You had time to move. I could see you tracking the blade. You had time." "Yes. Why didn't you?" Bruce looked at her steadily. "Because moving would have been the wrong answer," he said. "You were not cutting. You were asking a question. I answered it in the only way that was honest." She held his gaze. "What was my question?" "You were asking whether fear replaces my sight under real pressure," said Bruce. "Many fighters can read a situation clearly in practice. Put a live blade in front of their face, and their fear takes over before their eyes do. They react to the fact of the sword instead of the truth of the moment." He paused. "You wanted to know if my sight holds when it matters." She stared at him for a long moment. "And the answer?" she said quietly. "You already saw it," said Bruce. The dojo held its breath. Then Tomoe Shiraishi, the greatest sword master in Japan, undefeated in 10 years of challenges, the woman who had put 3 men in hospital with a blade she had stopped in time, barely, did something that her student Hiroshi Doi, had he been there to see it, would have written about in his journal in letters twice the normal size. She lowered the sword completely. Let it rest at her side, and she said in a voice that was quieter than anything she had said all evening, Sit down, Mr. Lee. I think we need to talk before we do anything else. Bruce sat, and the night opened up like a room they had not known was there. They sat on opposite sides of the dojo floor, cross-legged 4 meters apart. Tomo placed the sheathed sword across her knees and rested both hands open on top of it. Bruce sat with his palms face up in his lap, open hands, not guarded ones, as if he had come here with nothing to hide and wanted that to be visible from the first moment. No tea, no cushions, no ceremony beyond what was already in the room. Just 2 people sitting on a dark, polished floor with 4 low lanterns burning in the corners. The cold November night pressed flat against the outside of the walls, and the kind of quiet between them that only comes when 2 people have decided, without saying so, to be completely honest. Tell me something honest, said Tomo. Everything I tell you will be honest, said Bruce. She looked at him for a moment to see if that was a performance. It was not. Then tell me this, she said. Do you believe, truly believe, not for a camera, not for a story, that you can defeat a real sword with your bare hands? In this room, against this sword, against me. Bruce did not answer right away. He sat with the question the way you sit with something genuinely heavy, turning it, finding where its real weight lives. This was one of the things Tomo had not expected about him. Most people her question made defensive or boastful. It made Bruce go quiet and inward, like a man checking a map he takes seriously. I believe, he said finally, that if I do everything exactly right, and I mean exactly, not close to right, not almost right, I have a real chance, a genuine one. He paused. But I also believe that if you do everything exactly right, I lose. That is the complete truth, both halves of it. Tomo was still for a moment. You are a very honest person, she said. The words came out quieter than she had intended, softer. I try to be. Honesty is more useful than confidence. Confidence without accuracy is just noise. Every fighter who came to this dojo before you told me they were going to beat me without difficulty. A thin ghost of contempt moved across her face and was gone just as quickly, replaced by something tireder and more true. Some of them made speeches, long ones, about their victories, about their training, about why a sword was no match for someone like them. She looked at her hands resting on the sheath. They were defeated before they walked onto the floor. They were not fighting me. They were fighting the story they had already decided to tell about themselves afterward. It's the most common kind of loss, said Bruce. Fighting your own image instead of what's actually in front of you. The image always gets in the way. It slows everything down. Tomo nodded. Then she looked up at him directly. Can I ask you something in return? Something equally honest? Yes. What happens to you if you lose tonight? The question surprised him, not because it was cruel, but because it was the same question turned around, the exact same shape. He had asked it of her, and now she was asking it back, which meant she had been sitting with it about herself before he ever arrived. And she wanted to know if he had been doing the same. He had. If I lose tonight, said Bruce slowly, I will know something I did not know before. I will know with my whole body, not just with thinking, where the limit of what I can do really is. Right now, I only know it approximately. A real answer is worth more than a comfortable guess. He paused. I am not afraid of losing. I am afraid of never having found out. Tomo was very still. That is the exact same reason I have been issuing these challenges for 10 years, she said quietly. I know. Not to prove I was right, to find out whether I was. Yes, said Bruce. The lanterns breathed and crackled. Something in the dojo shifted slightly, the way the air in a room shifts when a window is opened somewhere else in the building. A change of pressure, barely felt but real. My father taught me that, said Tomo. Her voice had become very careful now. The way hands become careful around something fragile. He told me that the most dangerous thing a person can have is not a weapon. It is a closed mind, a mind that has already decided the answer and stops looking. She looked down at the old sword resting across her knees. He died before I could sit with him and tell him that I finally understood that lesson, not just in my head, all the way through. You are telling him right now, said Bruce gently. You have been telling him every morning you walk into this dojo and every night you close it up. Every time you stepped onto this floor and asked a real question instead of a safe one. That was you telling him. He hears it. Tomoe looked at him for a long time without speaking. Her eyes were very bright. Not tears, something else. Something that lives just behind where tears start. Deeper and steadier and older. You say very strange things for a fighter, she said finally. A small smile, the kind that cannot quite help itself. I had a strange teacher, said Bruce. His voice was warm in a way that the rest of the conversation had not quite been. Warmer and a little younger. The first real one. His name was Yip Man. He was a small man, quiet. He always wore a long robe and moved around the school like a man who had nothing to prove to anyone, which was the most impressive thing about him before you had even seen him do anything. He paused and something moved through his expression that Tomoe recognized the way you recognize weather. Grief worn, smoothed by time, carried not as a wound anymore, but as a weight that had simply become part of how you stood. He taught me when I was 13 years old. Mon Wing Chun Kung Fu in Hong Kong. He is still the clearest thinker I have ever met on the subject of what fighting actually is. What did he say it was? Said Tomoe. She was listening with her whole body, leaning in, not physically, but in every other sense. A conversation, said Bruce, the most honest one available to two people, because you cannot lie with your body, not at full speed, not under real pressure. Whatever you truly are comes all the way out. Your real courage, your real character, your real belief in yourself. You cannot dress any of it up or hide any of it when someone is genuinely trying to take it apart and you are genuinely trying to keep it together. Tomoe was nodding slowly. In Kenjutsu we say, the sword is a mirror. When you raise it against another person, what you see in that moment is yourself. Yes, said Bruce. The word came out with a weight behind it. Recognition, deep and immediate. Exactly that. From completely different directions, we arrived at exactly the same place. He looked at her. She looked at him. 400 years of sword in her lap, 31 years of empty-handed art in his. So what do you want to see tonight? He said. When you look in the mirror, what are you hoping is there? Tomoe sat with that question for a long moment, a full, real moment of sitting with it. The truth, she said simply. I want to feel the real answer, not think it. I have been thinking it for 20 years, and thinking has its limit. Tonight I want the thing itself, in my hands, in my body. I want to know, not believe, not hope. I want to know. Bruce looked at her steadily. Then he unfolded from the floor and stood up in one quiet movement. Then let's stop talking, he said. Tomoe rose. The sword came up with her. In the low, warm, trembling light of the four-corner lanterns, the old blade caught every flicker and held it, glowing along its length like something alive, like something that had been waiting 400 years for exactly this night. They faced each other across the open floor. The dojo was perfectly still, and the real conversation, the honest one, the one with no words, the one that would answer everything, was about to begin. It did not begin with an explosion. It began with stillness. They stood 6 meters apart on the dark polished floor. The 4 lanterns burned low in their corners, on throwing just enough light to see by and not quite enough to trust. Between them, the air was cool and completely empty. No furniture, no obstruction, nothing except the space that all of this had been building toward. All week, all year, all the long searching years before either of them knew the other existed. They breathed. The old dojo breathed with them. Then Tomoe Shiraishi began to move. Not a charge, not an attack, a circle. She began to walk a slow, deliberate, perfectly controlled circle around him, her feet making almost no sound on the wood, each step placed with the care of someone who has thought about footwork every single day for 32 years. The sword stayed perfectly still in front of her body, pointing directly at the center of Bruce's chest, unwavering, as steady as if it were mounted on a stand, rather than held by 2 human hands that had been moving just seconds before. She moved the way something vast and certain moves, the way a tide moves, patient, inevitable. Not hurrying because it has never needed to. Bruce turned with her, smooth, unhurried, keeping her at the same angle in front of him at all times. His hands hung loose and ready at his sides. His face was calm in the way a person's face is calm when all the alertness has moved inward, leaving the outside still. He was reading everything she gave him, the exact placement of each foot, the angle of her leading shoulder, the almost invisible rise and fall of her breathing, the way the sword tip moved a fraction when she shifted her weight from one heel to the other. She was measuring him. He understood that completely, a sculptor circling the stone, not yet touching it, learning the shape of it first, learning where the work must begin. He let her measure, 1 full circle, 2, 3, slow and deliberate and absolutely focused. Then she attacked. The word attack is too small for what happened. It was a change of state. One moment she was at the edge of her circle, and the next she was inside his reach, and the sword was sweeping in a horizontal arc toward his left shoulder at a speed that the eyes could register only as a blur of lantern gold light. Bruce dropped his body. He went down and hard to the right, twisting at the hip and bending the knees simultaneously, dropping his center below the line of the cut in the fraction of a second he had available. The blade passed an inch, perhaps less, above his left shoulder. He heard the soft, clean sound it made through the air, felt the brief cold breath of it against his ear. In the same motion, he was already rising, pushing off the floor with his right foot, driving himself upward and forward to try to close the distance before she could reset. Close the distance. That was always the goal. Get inside the sword's reach, to the one place it could not follow. She was already gone. She had pulled back and circled right in the same fraction of time he had used to rise, giving herself room, re-establishing the distance, resetting the blade to center as if none of it had happened. As if she had simply asked a question and was waiting, without impatience, for the next one. The exchange had taken less than 1 second from start to finish, and they separated. They breathed. The dojo was quiet again, a different quality in Tomo's eyes now. Something that had not been there before the first exchange. A sharpness, a brightness, something that was very close to pleasure, though it was harder than pleasure, cleaner than it. You dropped your body, she said, instead of stepping back. Stepping back gives you room to continue, said Bruce. His breathing was controlled but working. Dropping gives me a fraction of a second before your sword can change angle. That fraction is enough. She looked at him for one moment with those bright, sharp eyes. Then she attacked again. This time it was a feint so clean and so complete that even knowing to watch for one, Bruce nearly missed it. She began a cut from high right, a genuine cut, committed in the body, not the arms. We're the kind that cannot be faked in the shoulder because the shoulder does not know it is a feint. At the very last fraction of its arc, she converted it into a thrust, her wrists rolling inward, and the blade driving straight at his center, where a second ago there had only been a downward sweep. Bruce had not been watching her arms. He had been watching her weight. Her back heel had risen, just barely, just 1 small degree more than it had during the circles. And that tiny rise had told him the feint was coming before a single visible movement began. He was already moving left, already offline, when the thrust came through the space where his center had been. As it passed him, he brought his right forearm across, not blocking. Never blocking. Never meet force with force, but meeting the flat of the blade at an angle and adding his arm's movement to the sword's own motion, redirecting it further left and past him, using the sword's own speed to take it away. He did not grab, did not try to take it, just redirected. Water around a stone. The blade swept harmlessly past his right side. Tomo's momentum carried her 1 single step forward. 1 step was all it took. And in that step, Bruce was already beside her, inside her reach, inside the sword's reach. His right hand open and moving toward her right wrist. Not a strike, a touch. The word in his own art was bridge, making contact, establishing connection, beginning the conversation at close distance. She felt it coming. She pivoted. Faster than he had thought she could pivot. She reversed the direction of the sword in a backhand cut that unwound from the wrist and shoulder together like a spring releasing, the blade coming back across at a completely different angle than it had left. Bruce bent at the waist, folding himself in half in one explosive movement, and the blade passed over his back. He felt the displaced air of it warm against his shoulder blades. That was how close. The width of a breath. They separated again. Both breathing harder now, not heavily. Neither of them was near their limit. But differently. The air itself felt different inside the dojo. Warmer, charged. The way the air feels just before a storm announces itself, when the pressure drops and every nerve in your body knows something large is coming even before the sky changes. This was not a fight. It had never been one. It was exactly what they had both called it in the moments before standing up. A conversation, question and answer and question again. Each exchange refining the thing being asked. Each response narrowing toward a truth that neither of them could have reached with words alone. She attacked 7 more times across the next 4 minutes. Every attack was different. Not one of them repeated an angle or an entry point from any previous attack. She moved through her art the way a master musician moves through a composition. Every note placed deliberately, every pause as intentional as every sound. The whole thing building towards something that the listener cannot predict, but will recognize completely when it arrives. Cuts from below, cuts from above. Thrusts that became cuts and cuts that became thrusts in the space between one blink and the next. A long pause, so long that Bruce felt the silence of it on his skin, felt his own attention beginning to drift the smallest amount, and then an explosion of speed. 3 connected cuts in less time than it takes to say the word 3. Bruce moved. He dropped, pivoted, redirected, circled. He moved the way water moves, not by resisting the shape of what came at him, but by becoming the shape, flowing around it, finding the path that did not require him to be stronger than the sword, because nothing in his hands could be stronger than that sword, and he had known it since before he stepped through the door. He had built his entire approach on that one honest fact. 3 times he got his right hand within inches of her wrist. The 3rd time he almost made contact, and he saw in her eyes the precise moment she understood he had gotten that close, and he saw her file it away behind those dark, steady eyes and factor it into everything that came after. Twice he touched the flat of the blade with his forearm, redirecting it. The first time surprised her. The second time she had already begun to adjust for it before the contact happened, which told him that the second time was the last time that particular approach would work. Once she changed her angle mid-cut faster than he had calculated was possible, and the blade came so close to his throat that he felt the air it moved against his skin. Not as wind exactly, but as a sudden thin cold line that knew exactly where his throat was. That one settled into his chest and stayed there. Heavy and clarifying. After that exchange, they both stopped. No agreement to stop, no word or signal. They simply both stopped at the same moment, the way a conversation stops when both people have said the thing that needed to be said and need a moment before the next true thing. They stood. They breathed. Between them on the dojo floor was a complex, beautiful map of footprints going in every direction. The record of everything that had just happened, written in dust and the faint marks of moving feet on old polished wood. "You are extraordinary," said Tomo. The words came out level and factual, the way she would report the weather. "I have never had anyone reach my wrist 3 times in a single session. Not one person in 10 years. And no one has ever redirected this blade twice." "Your feints are perfect," said Bruce. His voice was steady, but there was something alive in it, something bright and genuine that had not been there before the first exchange. "I cannot read your intention from your arms, not at all. I have to read your weight distribution entirely, and your weight is almost as disciplined as your arms." A pause. "Almost," she said. "Almost," he agreed. The lanterns crackled once, just once, together, as if they were listening. "We are even," said Tomo quietly. "Yes," said Bruce. They looked at each other across the footprint map on the floor. 2 people who had just spoken the most honest sentences available to them, spoken them with their bodies, and in the only language that cannot lie, and who both knew that the conversation was not finished. "I will not continue to the point where someone is harmed," said Tomo. Her voice was careful and certain. "That was never what this was for." "No," said Bruce. "It was never for that." But we have not found the last answer yet, she said. No. He looked at her. There is one more exchange. One final one. We have both felt it building the whole time. The whole night has been moving toward it. Tomo was very still. Something moved through her face. Not fear, but the awareness of something large and close and true. Yes, she said softly. One more. I am ready when you are. She looked at him for a long moment. The lantern light lay gold across her face and the old sword in her hands, patient as stone, airy patient as the 400 years in the blade itself. 5 minutes, she said. I need 5 minutes. She walked to the far wall of the dojo and sat on her knees, the sword laid flat on the floor directly in front of her, her hands resting open in her lap. She closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed until it was barely visible. She went somewhere, not away, somewhere inside, somewhere deep and very still, the place she had been going every morning for 32 years before she picked up a sword. The place her father had shown her existed, the first time he sat her down after a training session when she was 9 years old and said, "Before you can use the sword, you must know where to find the silence." Bruce walked to the center of the floor. He sat cross-legged, his hands open in his lap, and he closed his eyes too. They breathed. Together, without knowing they were doing it together, they breathed at the same slow rate in the dim and quiet dojo. The lanterns burned low, and in that deep, shared stillness, somewhere beneath the breathing and the darkness and the cold November night pressing against the walls, the shape of the final answer was already forming. Patient as the sword, patient as the years, waiting for the last moment of the conversation to arrive. When Tomo Shiraishi rose from her 5 minutes of stillness, she was different, not visibly different. Her robe was the same, her posture was the same, the sword was in the same hand at the same angle. But Bruce felt the change before his eyes could name it. Felt it the way you feel a shift in the temperature of a room, a degree or two. Something the skin notices before the mind catches up. Something had settled in her during those 5 minutes on her knees. The bright, searching, driven energy of the earlier exchanges. That energy that had felt like fire looking for a place to burn, had gone somewhere deep and quiet inside her. What remained on the surface was something else entirely. Stillness with an edge in it. Stillness that had made a decision. She was not thinking anymore. She was only being. This was the version of Tomoe Shiraishi that old Saburo Igawa had tried to describe over green tea in the Narima district. Watch the version that had no fear, not because fear was absent, but because something larger than fear had taken up all the available space. Something that had her father's name on it, and 32 years of every morning before anyone else was awake, and every night after everyone else had stopped. This was her art at its most complete. Not a technique or a strategy, a state. Bruce had known it was coming. He had been waiting for it all night. She walked to the center of the dojo floor with steady, unhurried steps. She stopped. She raised the sword, not into a fighting position, but straight up, held vertically before her face with both hands, the blade pointing at the ceiling, the handle at the level of her chin, the formal salute of the Shiraishi school. A salute that meant, I see you. I respect what this is. I am completely here. Bruce stood from his cross-legged position on the floor in one quiet movement. He returned the bow, a full one, low, held for 3 full counts. Not performance, recognition. 2 people acknowledging what was about to happen and what it meant. Then she moved into her stance, and she waited. She was giving him the opening, making him be the one to close the distance, to step willingly into the most dangerous ground. The zone directly in front of her, where the sword had its fullest range and its most complete advantage. Every fighter who had come before him had hesitated at this point. Some for a few seconds, some for much longer. One man, Kenji had told him, had stood at the edge of that distance for nearly 2 minutes, his body refusing to do what his mind was telling it, before he finally backed away. Bruce understood exactly what she was asking. Whether he would come to her, not because he had no other choice, but because coming was the only honest answer. Whether, in the final test, with everything on the line, His belief in what he knew would hold its shape under the full weight of what was real. He breathed. Out, slow and complete. In, slow and complete. He moved. He walked toward her at an even, controlled pace. Not charging, not creeping. Walking. The same pace you would use walking towards something you had decided to do and had no intention of undoing. The distance between them closed. 6 meters, 5, 4, and the sword was there in front of him, steady and ancient and absolutely serious, and the woman behind it had no fear in her body that he could find anywhere, and still he walked. 3 meters. She cut. She cut the instant his front foot crossed the invisible line where her range was complete, the line she had known with her body long before he had taken his first step toward her. It was the fastest, cleanest, most committed cut she had thrown in the entire long night. A diagonal sweep from her right shoulder down toward his left hip, the kind of cut that carries everything behind it, that does not leave room for a second option, because it was designed to be the only cut needed. Bruce's body answered before his thinking mind could form a single word. He pivoted hard to the left, not away from the blade but parallel to it, going with the angle of the cut rather than across it, turning his left hip back and away while his right side came forward. He felt the edge of the blade make contact with his right forearm. Not a cut, not quite, but real contact, the flat of the ancient steel pressing for a fraction of a second against his skin as the cut drove through its full arc. And in that same fraction, that same breath of contact, his left hand came up. Not fast, not slow, exactly fast enough. It found her sword arm at the wrist, not gripping, just meeting it, the way one river meets another and they turn together instead of crashing, at the precise point that the old texts of Wing Chun called the gate, the place where the smallest amount of directed force could change the direction of the largest amount of committed force. He pressed, he redirected, not against her power, with it, adding his arm's motion to the sword's own downward arc, continuing it past where she had intended it to stop, bending the whole line of the cut further and further down. Now his right hand arrived at her elbow at the same moment. He did not wrench it, he guided it. He took the direction she had already created with her own committed weight and turned it gently inward and down, the way you turn the course of a river by adding to its bank rather than blocking its flow. The sword tip tracing a long spiral toward the dojo floor, her own momentum describing the circle that brought it all the way down. The tip of the 400-year-old sword touched the old polished wood. It made a sound like a single note plucked on a kodo string in an empty room. Clean, final, quietly enormous. His left hand held her wrist. His right hand held her elbow. The blade rested on the floor. Between the three of them, his 2 hands and her 1 sword, all the force of the evening had come to a complete and total stillness. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched, longer than the breath, longer than the heartbeat, long enough that both of them had time to understand everything it meant, standing there in that small circle of contact on the dark dojo floor at nearly 1 in the morning, with the 4 corner lanterns burning their last hour of oil, and the cold Tokyo night holding perfectly still outside the walls. Tomoe could have reversed it. She had a technique for exactly that. A rotation of the wrist and a drop of the elbow that could have broken the geometry of what Bruce had built and opened the distance between them in an instant. She knew it. Her body knew it before her mind did. She did not use it, because using it would have been dishonest. He had come to her, walked the full distance, no hesitation, no flinching, and he had found the one precise path through the things she had built over 32 years, and the path was real. She could feel that it was real. She could feel it in the exact placement of his left hand at the gate of her wrist, in the angle of his right hand at her elbow, in the fact that neither hand was squeezing or forcing or fighting, only guiding, only holding the shape of what had already happened. Fighting it now would have been arguing with the truth. She opened her hands. The sword rested on the floor, held by nothing but gravity and old wood. Bruce stepped back. He released her arm completely. He did not pick up the sword. He did not touch it. He left it exactly where it was on the floor between them, belonging to her, meaning what it meant. And they stood on opposite sides of the sword and looked at each other. The lanterns burned. The dojo breathed its slow, patient breath. Somewhere outside, far away, a car moved through the quiet streets of Tokyo, its engine sound arriving and disappearing like a single long word spoken by the city. Tomoe Shiraishi looked down at the sword on the floor. She looked at it for a very long time. Her face was completely still, the way deep water is still. Not because nothing is moving, but because what is moving is too deep to show at the surface. Something was happening in her eyes, something moving through them, wave after wave of it, and then finally something settling. When she looked up, her face had changed, not defeated. That was the first thing Bruce registered. And he registered it with relief so real he could feel it in his hands. Not defeated, not broken, not diminished. Something almost the opposite. Something he had not expected to see here, tonight in this room, on this woman's face. She looked free, like a person who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has just, for the first time, been allowed to set it down. Not to throw it away, just to set it down and stand up straight and feel what their spine felt like without the weight on it. "It can be done," she said. Her voice was quiet and level and absolutely certain. The way things are certain when they have just been proven and are no longer theory. "It can be done," Bruce agreed. "Not easily and not always. The conditions have to be exactly right, and the person has to be exactly right, and there are 100 moments in what just happened where a different version of tonight goes completely differently." "I know," said Timon. "This is not proof that hands defeat swords," said Bruce carefully. He wanted this said exactly right. "It is proof that the conversation between them is more complex and more interesting than any simple answer can hold." Tomo looked at him for a long moment. "Yaku," she said slowly. "Yes, that is the truest thing anyone has said to me in 20 years. She paused. "I have been demanding a simple answer from a question that was never going to give me one. My father would have caught that error in me much sooner." "Your father also taught you to keep asking until you found the real answer," said Bruce. "You did not stop. That is what he would have seen." Tomoe walked to the fallen sword. She bent and picked it up with both hands, holding it the way she always held it, with complete attention, as if it were still the most important thing in any room it entered, because it was. She carried it to the wooden rack on the wall. She placed it in the highest position, the position of honor, the place her father's sword had occupied in this dojo for 40 years before it became hers, and she stepped back and looked at it resting there. "My father would have liked you," she said, without turning around. Her voice was soft, younger than it had been all evening. "He would have argued with you for hours and enjoyed every moment of it." Bruce smiled, a real one, warm all the way through. "And I would have loved every minute of arguing with him." Tomo turned. For a moment they simply stood in the dim dojo looking at each other. Two people who had just finished something long and difficult and true and were standing in the space that comes after, which is always quieter and larger than expected. "Can I ask you one more honest thing?" said Tomo. "Always," said Bruce. "Was there a moment tonight, any moment at all, when you believed you could not do it?" Bruce did not hesitate. "Every single moment," he said, "from the minute I walked through that door until the second the sword touched the floor. Every moment in between, I believed I might not be able to do it." Tomo was quiet for a beat. "But you kept moving." "Yes." "Why?" She asked it simply. Not as a challenge. As a person who genuinely wanted to know. The way a student wants to know something from a teacher they have just chosen to trust. Bruce was quiet for a moment. Not because the answer was hard to find, but because he wanted to find the exact right words for it. The ones that would carry the whole weight of what he meant without losing any of it on the way. "Because moving toward the thing is the answer," he said finally, "not the result of the moving itself. The answer to any question that matters is never sitting somewhere safe waiting for you to think your way to it. It lives inside the act of going toward it, especially when you are afraid. Especially then. The fear is not the signal to stop. It is the signal that you are pointed at something real." Tomoe received those words the way good soil receives rain. completely, without waste, taking in everything and letting none of it run off. My father said something like that once, she said quietly. He said, "The person who teaches you the most is the one who shows you where your map was wrong, not to shame you, so you can draw a better one." She looked at Bruce with eyes that were very bright. "You have shown me where my map was wrong, in the best possible way. And you have shown me things tonight I will not forget," said Bruce. "Your art is extraordinary, Shiraishi-sensei. The weight discipline, the faint construction, the way you read and fill space. I have faced many people in my life. I have never faced anything quite like that." A pause. The lanterns were very low now. The room was full of something warm that had nothing to do with fire. "Then perhaps," said Tomo carefully, "we are not finished learning from each other." Bruce looked at the ancient sword on the wall. 400 years of one family's devotion to one true thing. He thought about his own teachers and his own art, and the sentence he had been trying to understand his whole life. Absorb what is useful, reject what is useless, add what is essentially your own, and how it grew a little clearer every year, and how it would never be completely finished growing, and how that was not a problem, but the whole point. "No," he said. "I don't think we are." The room held them both in its quiet. The night pressed warm and close against the walls, and something that had not existed 12 hours ago, something with no name yet, something that would take years to fully understand, had just been born in the dark of a Tokyo dojo in the dying last hours of a Friday in November, 1971. Bruce Lee did not leave the Shiraishi dojo until nearly 4 in the morning. After the sword touched the floor and the words were said and the honest things were finished, they did not rush to end the night. They sat on the dojo floor the way people sit when they have been through something real together and are not yet ready to let the ordinary world back in. They talked about what they were each trying to build, about what they believed art was actually for, underneath all the technique and discipline, what the whole long project of a committed life pointed toward if you followed it far enough, about their teachers and what it felt like to miss them, about the particular loneliness of training alone in the very early morning when no one was watching and no one would ever know if you had simply stopped, and the strange thing that kept you going anyway, that had no clean name, but was the realest thing you owned. Tomoe made tea in a small pot on a burner in the back room, strong green tea that tasted like cold, clean air, the kind that is too bitter for people who do not mean it. They drank it sitting cross-legged on the dojo floor, while the 4 corner lanterns burned lower and lower until the last one went out around 3:30, and the room was lit only by the thin gray beginning of pre-dawn light pressing under the door. When Bruce finally stood to leave, he said, "I would like to come back, if you are willing." Tomo looked up at him. "To train? Yes. To learn from you, Honan, and to share what I know, if it is useful to you." She was quiet for a moment, turning her empty teacup slowly in her hands, looking at the inside of it the way her father used to look at things he was thinking seriously about. "People will say things," she said, "when they hear about this. A woman known for 10 years of open challenges begins training with the man she challenged, the man who came the closest to defeating her." She paused. "They will construct whatever story fits the shape of what they already believe." "They will," said Bruce simply. "What do you say to that?" Tomo set the cup down. "My father used to say that only a person with nothing real inside them spends their time worrying about what the outside looks like." She met his eyes directly. "I have something real inside me. I have had it since I was 9 years old, standing in the center of this floor with a wooden sword. What people say about the outside of my life has never once changed what is inside it." "Good," said Bruce. He bowed, she bowed. He walked to the entrance, put on his shoes, and stepped out through the door into the Bunkyo night. The street was empty and very cold and perfectly quiet. The paper lantern above the door had burned out at some point during the evening. He had not noticed when, and the entrance to the dojo behind him was dark. His breath came in the slow white clouds that dissolved into the black air above the narrow street. He stood still for a moment, feeling the cold and the quiet and the particular hugeness of a city at the last hour before dawn, when it has almost but not quite forgotten how enormous it is. He began to walk. No direction, just walking, feeling the stone pavement under his feet. feeling Tokyo breathing slowly all around him through its closed doors and dark windows. He touched his right forearm with 2 fingers from his left hand. There was a thin red line there, just below the wrist. Not a cut, just a pressure mark where the flat of the 400-year-old blade had made brief contact during the final exchange. The skin was slightly raised. It would be gone in 2 days, maybe 3. He pressed it gently, held the pressure for a moment. He had been replaying the final exchange in his mind since the instant it ended. The pivot, the contact point at the gate of her wrist, the redirected elbow, the long spiral of the sword tip to the floor, pulling each piece apart carefully. So with the way a watchmaker examines the insides of a watch, not because it is broken, but because he loves knowing exactly how the true thing works. He could see 5 moments where the outcome could have been different, 5 exact points where a fraction more speed from her, or a fraction less precision from him, and the story of tonight ended in a completely different way. He did not feel like a person who had won something. He felt like a student who had passed a very hard test and now understood, standing on the other side of it, how much larger the subject was than the test had been able to show. It was nearly 4:15 when he arrived back at Kenji's apartment building. He let himself in quietly with the spare key Kenji had given him, climbed the narrow stairs. When pushed open the door to find Kenji Watanabe sitting at his kitchen table in his robe and slippers, with a cup of coffee that had clearly been cold for some time, his glasses slightly crooked, his face carrying the specific expression of a person who has been awake all night imagining catastrophes. The expression shifted to something that was equal parts terror and relief when Bruce walked through the door. The face of a man who has been preparing for the worst and must now rapidly revise. "You are alive," said Kenji. "I am alive," said Bruce. He sat down at the table, picked up Kenji's cold coffee without asking, and drank half of it. Kenji said nothing about this. "What happened?" said Kenji. Bruce set the cup down and looked at the kitchen table for a moment. Then he looked at Kenji. "We had a conversation," he said. Kenji blinked. "A conversation. A very honest one." A pause. Kenji's mouth opened and closed once. And I am going back on Monday," said Bruce. "I asked her if she would be willing to teach me some of what she knows and share what I know in return. She said yes." Kenji stared at him for a long, still moment. Something traveled across his face. Confusion, then disbelief, then a slow and reluctant wonder. "Mr. Lee," he said carefully, "she has issued open challenges for 10 years. She has never agreed to anything that was not a formal contest. She has never trained with anyone from outside her school. Not once. And you spoke to her for one evening, and she simply agreed." "She was never actually looking for someone to defeat," said Bruce. He picked up the cold coffee again. "When she was looking for someone she could talk to honestly. She just did not know how to ask for that directly. So she asked the only way she knew." Kenji was quiet for a very long time. "I think," he said finally, in the voice of a man arriving at a conclusion, slowly and with great sincerity, "that you might be the strangest person I have ever met in my life." Bruce smiled into the cold coffee. Outside the kitchen window, the first pale light of a Tokyo morning was just beginning to find the edges of the rooftops. The first bird started somewhere in the gray. A delivery truck moved through a distant street, its engine the only engine in the whole enormous city, for one long, quiet moment. The night was over. Something else, something without a name yet, had just begun. Bruce Lee spent 2 more weeks in Tokyo that November. Every day, rain or cold, no matter what the sky was doing above the Bunkyo district, he walked to the Shiraishi dojo. Not always to train. Some days they trained for hours, the dojo floor filling again with the sound of movement and the particular focused silence that lives underneath serious work. Some days they simply sat and talked about principles, about the inner geometry of each other's arts, about where their different paths, walked from completely opposite directions, arrived at exactly the same place. Some days Tomo would demonstrate something with the old sword, a single movement, a single principle, drawn out slowly so its bones were visible. And Bruce would watch it 6 or 7 or 10 times and then ask 1 or 2 questions that made her stop completely. Made her stand still with the sword in her hands and look slightly inward. The way a person looks when they are searching for something in a room they have lived in for 30 years and are only now seeing for the first time from a new angle. Questions that she later described to Hiroshi Doi as the most uncomfortable kind of useful. In return, Bruce shared the things that lived at the center of what he was building. The science of speed, not just how to move fast, but why the body moves fast, what gets in the way of its natural speed, and how to remove those things one by one until what is left is only pure, unobstructed motion. The mathematics of momentum and how the smallest person can redirect the force of the largest if the angle is exactly right. The principle of using what is already coming towards you rather than building your own force from scratch to meet it. Things he had been refining for years into something he was beginning, in private, to call Jeet Kune Do. The way of the intercepting fist, not a style, a way of thinking, a way of seeing. Tomoe absorbed everything with the same quality she brought to her sword work, completely without waste, without performing understanding she did not yet have. She never nodded along to something that had not reached her yet. She never let an explanation pass until she had taken it into her own hands and her own body and felt from the inside whether it was true. She tested every idea on the floor before she accepted it. This was the way her father had taught her to learn, and she had never found a better way. And they were very alike in this, and both of them knew it, and neither of them said it directly because some recognitions are better carried quietly. Hiroshi Doi watched all of it from a respectful distance. The careful, attentive distance of a young student who understands that he is watching something he may not see again in his lifetime. He wrote in his personal journal every evening during those 2 weeks, in small, careful letters that filled page after page of the plain notebook he carried everywhere. Sensei is different, not changed and more herself. Something that was held tight for a long time has become loose. She laughs more now. Not often. She has never been a person who laughs often. But more than before, which was not at all. Mr. Lee is a very strange person. When he does not move through the world the way that famous people move. He does not seem to notice that he is famous, or if he notices, he does not find it very interesting. What he finds interesting, I am still trying to name. Sensei finds it interesting too. I think they are both looking for the same word and neither of them has found it yet, and that is why they keep coming back to the dojo every morning. On the last day of Bruce's stay in Tokyo, he and Tomoe met at the dojo one final time. They did not train. They sat together in the dojo in the late afternoon, in real light, winter sunlight coming in long, slow, yellow bars through the high windows, falling across the polished floor that still held, if you looked carefully, the faint ghost of the footprint map from the night of the challenge. The lanterns were cold and dark. The sword rested in its place of honor on the wall. "I have made a decision," said Tomo. Bruce waited. "I am going to stop the challenges," she said. He looked at her. He did not say anything immediately because the statement deserved the space of a real pause rather than a quick response. "Not because I finally have the answer," she said. "I have the answer now. The real one. And the real answer is that the question was never as simple as I was asking it. A question that large does not have a clean yes or no inside it." She looked at the long bars of yellow light on the floor. "I am going to stop because I found what I was actually searching for. I believed for 20 years that I was searching for proof. And I was not." A pause, quiet and certain. "I was searching for a worthy conversation, one completely honest one, with someone who was looking for the same true thing I was and was not afraid to go all the way toward it." She looked at him. "I found it." Bruce nodded slowly. Something in his face was warm and serious at the same time. The expression of a person receiving something they did not ask for and are not sure they deserve, but accept with their whole hands. "What will you do?" he asked. "Teach," said Tomo simply. "What I have always done, but better now, with the parts of the map I did not have before." "And the sword?" She looked at it on the wall. "The sword will do what it has always done," she said quietly. "It will show me who I am every morning." "That is enough." Bruce looked at the bars of light on the floor for a long moment. "I have a film to finish in Hong Kong," he said, "and a book I need to write. The philosophy underneath the art, the thing beneath all the techniques, the real thing. I have been carrying it around for years, and I think it is time to put it down in words before it gets too heavy to hold. The thing under the thing, said Tomo. Yes. A small smile. Exactly that. When he stood to leave for the last time, she walked him to the door. They stood in the frame of it together for one moment. The cold street behind him, the warm and quiet dojo behind her. The history of both of their lives pressing in from both sides. Thank you, she said. Thank you, he said. They bowed to each other. A real bow, deep, held, meaning every degree of it. He walked down the narrow Bunkyo street and turned the corner at the end and was gone from her sight. Tomoe stood in the doorway for a long minute, looking at the empty street where he had been, feeling the cold air on her face, not moving. Then she went inside. She walked to the wall and lifted the ancient sword from its rack with both hands and held it in the quiet and the winter light. Father, she said to the empty room. Her voice was very soft. I found the right battle, the one you said I would find. A pause. You were right. You were always right. She stood still for one more moment, holding the sword and the quiet and her father's memory and all the long years they were made of. Then she smiled on Sononon, small and real and all the way through. She returned the sword to its place. She walked to the center of the floor. Jala, she breathed once, all the way out and all the way in, and she began to practice. Not to prove anything, not to answer anything, not to win or defend or challenge or demonstrate, just to practice, which is the most honest thing a person can do with a love they intend to keep for the rest of their life. No newspaper ever carried the story. No photograph was ever taken. The 2 weeks Bruce Lee spent walking every morning to a plain-fronted dojo in the Bunkyo district of Tokyo in November 1971 existed in the world for years, only in 3 places. The memory of 2 teachers, the worried and wondering memory of one small, round man with smudged glasses, and the careful handwriting of a young student named Hiroshi Doi, who locked his journals in a plain wooden box under his bed and did not open the box again for 40 years. The world would never know what happened in that dojo, but the dojo floor knew. The old dark wood held the memory of those footprints, 2 sets going in every direction, complex and interwoven and beautiful. The record of a conversation that had been written not in words but in the only language that cannot lie, and the floor kept it, quietly, the way all true things are kept, in the places where they actually happened, long after everyone who was there has gone. All the way through this story, through every scene, every conversation, every moment in that dark Tokyo dojo, there was something that no one mentioned. Not Bruce, not Tomo, not Kenji Watanabe with his smudged glasses and his cold coffee and his enormous relief when Bruce walked back through his door alive. It's not old Saburo Egawa over green tea in the Narima district. Not young Hiroshi Doi in his careful handwriting. Not a single person who was close enough to know ever said this thing out loud. And now, at the very end, it can finally be told. On the night Bruce Lee stood in the Shiraishi dojo and faced Tomoe Shiraishi and her 400-year-old sword, on the night the blade stopped 2 inches from his cheek and he did not flinch, Bruce Lee was not at full strength. He had not been at full strength for 3 weeks. 3 weeks before he boarded the flight to Tokyo, while training alone in Hong Kong in the early morning the way he always trained, the way he had trained every morning since he was 13 years old, he had injured his right hand. A training accident. Oh, a moment of miscalculation in a striking drill that he had performed 10,000 times before. It happened in a fraction of a second, the way these things always happen. 1 degree of angle wrong, 1 fraction of a moment off, and the thing that has always been safe is suddenly not. 3 knuckles on his right hand swelled to nearly twice their normal size before the morning was over. The full speed of his right hand strike, his dominant hand, the faster and more accurate of his 2 hands by a margin he had spent 15 years developing, was reduced by something he privately and carefully estimated at 30%. Perhaps a little more. He wrapped the hand so the swelling could not be seen under clothing. He told no one. Not Kenji, not his family, no one. He bought his ticket and flew to Tokyo. He had made this decision for a reason that was entirely consistent with everything else about him, once you understand who he was. Backing out would have been easy, and Bruce Lee had never trusted easy. Easy was the shape of a choice that looked safe and was secretly a kind of hiding. Tomoe Shiraishi had asked a real question, a question she had been carrying for 20 years, a question she had built her entire adult life around finding the answer to. And running away from it because of a swollen hand was the same as lying to her. It was a dishonest answer dressed up as practicality. He would not do it, so he came. And in the 3 quiet days before Friday midnight, while Kenji watched him do what looked like nothing and worried anyway, what Bruce was actually doing was rebuilding his entire approach from the inside out. Through every technique he used that night, every pivot, every redirection, every touch at the gate of her wrist, every moment of contact with the flat of the blade was built on one central fact that he had accepted honestly and then worked around completely. His right hand was reduced. His dominant hand, the faster one, the one trained for 15 years to be the primary point of contact in every exchange, could not be the primary point of contact tonight. So he had made his left hand the primary. He had built an approach in which the left hand led everything, the gate contact, the redirections, the moments of bridge, and the right hand followed as support, as the guiding hand at her elbow, as the secondary shaper of each exchange. It was a thing he had never done before at this speed. Against this level of opponent, honing under this kind of pressure, it required him to do something even harder than fighting at full strength. It required him to fight honestly inside a limitation he could not remove. This was why Saburo's words had reached him so deeply that afternoon in the Narima district. Become what the sword cannot reach. He had heard those words not only as philosophy, he had heard them as instruction, as the exact shape of the problem he was carrying and had not yet found the words for. He had to become something that did not depend on full two-handed speed, something the sword could not find at the angle it expected. And he had 3 days to understand what that was. He had found it. The approach had worked. The blade had gone to the floor. But now, standing on a Hong Kong street 3 weeks later in the early morning light, holding a letter from Tokyo that had arrived that morning, Bruce could see with complete clarity the 5 exact moments in that dojo where the outcome could have been different, where 1 fraction more of her speed or 1 fraction less precision in his redirected left hand would have changed everything. He had been carrying this knowledge quietly ever since the night ended. He had not told Tomoe, he had not told Kenji, he had not told anyone. And then the letter arrived. It was written in careful English, 3 paragraphs, the handwriting neat and deliberate. The handwriting of a person who understands that how you write a thing is part of what you are saying. In the first paragraph, she said she had been thinking about that night. About everything said and everything that happened and everything that had not been said but had been present in the room anyway. The way certain truths are always present even when they have not yet been spoken. In the second paragraph, she said this: I have been teaching for many years. I have told my students many times. A true master does not wait for perfect conditions. A true master finds their art in the conditions they are actually given, not the conditions they wished for, or planned for, or deserved. I have said those words so many times they had become smooth from saying. I could say them without thinking about them anymore. Until that night. You did not have perfect conditions in my dojo, did you, Mr. Lee? Something was not right. I do not know what it was exactly. I did not know it that night. I only felt it. Something in the slight way you favored your left side. Something in the small adjustments you made that were 1 degree different from what I expected based on everything I had read about you. I felt the truth of it in the room without being able to name it, and I watched you find your path anyway. Precisely, without complaint, without asking the night to be different from what it was. That is the lesson I have been teaching for 20 years without ever having truly seen it. You showed it to me. I will teach it for the rest of my life, and I will know where I learned it. Thank you. Bruce read those words standing on a Hong Kong pavement in the cold morning air with his right hand, still faintly stiff, though the swelling was long gone. Holding the page, he read them once. He read them again. He stood very still for a long time. She had known. She had felt it in the room without being told. The way a person who has spent 40 years reading bodies, the way other people read books, feels the truth of something before the mind has caught up to name it. She had felt the slight left side preference, the small 1-degree adjustments, and she had known that something was not exactly as it appeared on the outside. And she had said nothing during the 2 weeks of training that followed. She had waited until she was back in Tokyo, until she had the right words, until the letter could carry the whole weight of what she wanted to say. Bruce pressed the letter flat against his chest with his right hand and looked up at the Hong Kong sky, pale and wide and full of early light, for a long moment without moving. In the third paragraph of her letter, Tomoe told him she planned to come to Hong Kong in the spring, to meet his students, to offer 1 week of sword teaching, free to anyone who wanted it, as a gift, as her way of saying that the walls she had believed in for 20 years were not walls at all. And she ended the letter with 4 words. Only 4. But they were the 4 words that held everything. The whole long conversation, the whole long search, the whole long night in a dark dojo with the lanterns burning low, compressed into the smallest possible space without losing a single piece of it. She wrote, "The blade is you." Bruce read those 4 words 7 times, standing on the pavement in the early Hong Kong morning. He counted the readings without meaning to, the way you count heartbeats when something large is happening in your chest. He had been teaching this truth for years, in his own language, through his own tradition, from his own side of the long road. He had been saying it in different words, in different forms, in different movements, since he was 13 years old, sitting in a dojo in Hong Kong, listening to a quiet man in a long robe explain what fighting actually was. And now a woman from a completely different country, a completely different art, a completely different life built on a completely different set of truths, a woman who had come to this understanding by traveling from the opposite direction on the same long road, had arrived at the exact same place and written it in 4 words on a page that Bruce Lee held in his slightly stiff right hand on a cold morning street in Hong Kong, reading it for the 7th time. The sword is not separate from the person holding it. The hands are not separate from the mind behind them. The technique is not the thing, the person is the thing, and the technique is only what the person looks like when they are being most completely themselves. Whatever you carry into the room, your grief, the memory of your father's face, your teacher's voice still present in every movement you have ever made, your fear, your courage, your love for the thing you have given your whole life to, it comes with you, all of it, every time. You cannot leave it at the door. You cannot set it down when the challenge comes. You bring all of it, and if you are honest with it, if you stop hiding it or fighting it and let it be exactly what it is, it becomes not the weight you feared, but the very ground you stand on. The blade is you. Bruce carefully folded the letter back into its original creases. He put it in his inside jacket pocket. He pressed his palm flat against his chest for 1 moment, feeling it there. Then he began to walk. Through the morning streets of his city, his work and his life all around him, his art alive in his hands, his teacher's voice somewhere in the back of everything, as it had always been. He was 31 years old, and he had so much left to do. And now he had one more true thing to carry with him while he did it. In the spring of 1972, Tomoe Shiraishi came to Hong Kong, exactly as she had promised. She brought Hiroshi Doi with her. He carried his notebook. He wrote everything down. She taught for 1 full week in Bruce's school, free to any student who wanted to learn. No condition, no charge, no challenge. She taught the inner principles of the sword. Breath as foundation, stillness as speed, honesty as the only technique that cannot be defeated. Students who had never held a sword in their lives stood in that room and felt something open in them that they would spend years trying to describe to people who had not been there. Every morning for those 10 days before the school opened and the students arrived, Bruce and Tomo trained together in the empty room, just the 2 of them, in the quiet before the city woke up. Moving through each other's arts the way rivers move through each other when they meet. Not merging, not losing their own shape, but changed forever by the meeting. On her last morning, Bruce walked her to the harbor. They stood watching the ships on the gray water. "The next challenge," said Tomo, "will not be a person." "No," said Bruce. "No. The next challenge is always the same one." She looked at the water. "The one in the mirror." Bruce was quiet for a moment. I've been fighting that one my whole life, he said. Yes, said Tomo. Me too. They stood together for a while in the quiet. Then she bowed deep and real. He bowed the same way. She turned and walked away across the harbor and did not look back, the way people walk when they are certain they will see each other again. Bruce watched her go until she was small in the distance. Then he turned back to face his city, the work, the art, the life, all of it waiting, and he began to walk. And that is the story of the night Bruce Lee stood barefoot on a dark dojo floor in Tokyo, with a 400-year-old sword 2 inches from his face, and did not move a single inch. 2 people walked into that dojo looking for the same true thing from opposite ends of the same long road. Both of them found it. That is what great art does. That is what a great life does. It keeps moving toward the real answer, even when the answer is hard, even when the conditions are not perfect, even when something is broken and nobody knows it but you. The blade is you. Whatever you carry, your fear, your love, your grief, your fight, it is not your weakness. It is your power. Before we go, drop a comment right now and tell us where in the world you are watching from. We have people tuning in from every corner of this planet, and every single location surprises us. Let us see where you are. Write your city, your country, anything. Just let us know you are here. If this story moved you even a little, hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second and it tells us to keep making stories like this one. Every single like helps more people find this channel, and that means more stories, more truth, more moments like the one you just watched. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell. When this channel is built on one simple idea, that the best stories are the ones that teach you something real about what it means to keep going. We find those stories and we bring them to you. That is all we do. Join us. Spread this video to one person today, one friend, one family member, one person who needs to hear that showing up when everything is not perfect is not weakness. It is the whole point. Now click on the video appearing on your screen right now. The next story is already waiting for you.